Hi, this is Dr. Bosch, and I thought I would spend some time talking about the immune system because that seems to be challenging for many students. To begin, when we talk about the immune system in Bio 202, we're talking about all systems that help defend the body from disease. There are different definitions of the immune system, but that's the one we're using. That's why I have included in this chapter, and you'll see this in the textbook as well, both the nonspecific or innate defenses and the specific defenses or adaptive defenses. The nonspecific defenses are pretty easy, I would think. Things like having skin covering our body to keep disease out, mucous membranes, fevers, and I think you won't have much trouble learning those. The adaptive defenses, what we call specific, are a little more challenging. These are defenses against known targets. Now, by known targets, we mean a particular kind of bacteria, maybe, a particular virus. So these are defenses against particular organisms, really. So you may have immunity against measles, or against mumps, or against diphtheria. Or you might have immunity against the cold you had in the fall. You'll never get that cold again because you have specific defenses against it. On the PowerPoint, we're looking at slide, it's around 31, about the humoral immune response. So this is a response where your B cells are activated and cause the multiplication of the B cells into what we call plasma cells, which then release antibodies. So this is a complicated response, and I'm going to spend more time talking about it specifically today. So in this area, I talked about the attack of the clones. You can kind of look through the outline and your textbook. And in particular, this idea that the B cells have to be activated by T cells in order for this to work, the T helper cells. It's a little difficult to find good illustrations of this process, but I will attach this illustration that might help you. This is similar to figures you'll see in your book and in my PowerPoint as well. But the basic idea is this, and that is foreign organisms, pathogens, organisms that are harmful to the human body, have on the outside of their cells molecules called antigens. And these outer molecules, they're usually right on the cell membrane, help our body identify invaders, pathogens, as compared to identifying our own cells. So we know all the antigens on the cells in our own body, at least we should. If we don't, we'd have an autoimmune disease. So when something foreign comes into our body, our white blood cells can detect that. And we have a number of kinds of lymphocytes. We're going to focus on the B lymphocytes, called B cells for short, the ones that grew primarily in the bone. And then the T lymphocytes, called T cells for short, that grew primarily in the thymus. So we're really looking at two kinds of white blood cells, the B cells, and in particular, a kind of T cell called a T helper cell. And you'll see why it's called a T helper cell in a minute. The way this works is that a B cell will detect an antigen on the cell membrane of a pathogen. That B cell will then carry that antigen on the outside of its own cell membrane. If a T cell encounters the same antigen, It's as though the B cell and T cell talk to each other. They do hook up and share information. I'm simplifying this a little, but that's the basic idea. And the B cell kind of says to the T cell, "Did you see what I saw?" And the T cell says to the B cell, "Yes, I saw the same thing." And the B cell says, "Are you sure?" And the T cell says, "Yes, I'm sure." Now, there's no conversation like that, but the idea is that you need both the B cell that has detected a particular antigen and a T cell that has detected the same antigen from the same pathogen, and they have to more or less agree that they have that same antigen. If that happens, the T cell releases cytokines. Cytokines are a chemical that activates the B cell. So once the B cell and T cell have detected the same antigen and sent that message back and forth between them, the T cell releases cytokines to cause the B cell to begin to reproduce itself. We call that B cell proliferation, and it will form first hundreds, then thousands, and then tens of thousands of cloned B cells. Now, those B cells, once we have a lot of them, we stop calling them B cells, we call them plasma cells. And that's partly because they are distributed throughout the body through the blood. And this is the important thing to remember about these plasma cells. They release antibodies. The antibodies are what kill the pathogen. So in other words, when the B cell and the T cell agree that there's a pathogen present in the body, they agree on this by noting the same outer antigen on that pathogen. Maybe it's COVID-19. They detect the same antigen on COVID-19. The T cell then releases the cytokines. The B cell multiplies and multiplies and multiplies into the thousands, hundreds of thousands sometimes. And each one of those B cells that we now call plasma cells will release antibodies that destroy the pathogen. Now, this can take a while. If you've had a flu, maybe you're sick for a whole week, that's how long it took to get to this point. And then slowly, slowly you start feeling better. And that is because you've gotten to the point where you have antibodies in your body to destroy it. Now, if you've ever heard of a disease that humans can't fight off, we just do not have the ability to produce the correct antibodies to destroy that pathogen. Luckily, these diseases are few in number. I can think of HIV. I can think of herpes, some of the herpes simplex varieties. Our body just cannot produce antibodies to get rid of. But for most diseases that come into our body, most pathogens, viruses, bacteria, etc., our body, if we have a healthy immune system, is very good at producing these antibodies. A second idea you need to remember about the immune system is that when these B cells proliferate, when they form, the B cells produce many plasma cells, they also produce what are called memory cells. So every cold, every sickness you've had in your whole life, you produced the plasma cells to destroy it with the antibodies, but you also produced memory cells. These memory cells will cause your body to fight that same disease, that same specific disease, very quickly. You won't even know that you had an invasion. So for example, if you had a vaccine for chickenpox, which will cause the memory cells to be made, or you had the chickenpox, if you again come into contact with someone with chickenpox, that virus may enter your body, but you'll never know it because these B cells, B memory cells, will proliferate very quickly and produce antibodies very quickly in huge numbers, 100, 1,000 times more antibodies than the first time you were sick. And that is why they say you are immune. So the actual term immune means you have the memory cells. You have the B memory cells. Now, in addition to the B memory cells, there are also T memory cells. So those same T helper cells that communicated with that original B cell, sometimes as you read about this, they'll call them naive, which means they're not really active yet. So those same T cells that were naive and are now active, and they release the cytokines, they also produce the T memory cells. So for every known disease your body has had, you now have T memory cells and B memory cells, which means that you can fight that disease very quickly, so quickly that you don't even know it entered your body. So we say that you are, in fact, immune. Now, normally, this means that you'll be immune for life. However, over many years, decades sometimes, that immunity will be reduced. So, for example, I had chickenpox when I was a small child. I'm now 60. That's a lot of years. So I went and had a shingles shot, which boosts my immunity, which we now know means it boosts the number of B and T memory cells that will go into action if I get exposed to chickenpox again. Chickenpox is maybe not the greatest example because we never really get rid of it. It kind of lives dormant in our body, but if they do become active again, instead of me getting shingles, which is basically chickenpox, those B and T memory cells will go into action very quickly. To end this, I want to show you another slide from the PowerPoint. This is slide 42 of the chapter 21 PowerPoint. It might be a little different on Canvas, but I'd like you to see that the first time you get a disease, here you are exposed to the disease, it takes a while for those antibodies to form. So this looks like almost 7 days later that you have enough antibodies to kill the disease. After this, though, you have the memory B and memory T cells. So if you get exposed to that same disease, the same one you got exposed to before, look how many antibodies can be produced. This is a logarithmic scale. So this is 10,000 times more. Actually, from here it's 10,000 times more antibodies. So your body is absolutely flooded with antibodies. You won't know you got the disease again. Over here, this was how much you needed to kill the disease, kill the pathogen. And that's at 10. This is at 10 to the fourth almost with your secondary response. So we call a primary response the first time we got a disease, and then secondary response the second time. Now, what's a little aggravating is you may say get rid of a cold, you'll never get that cold again. But then comes your cousin Vinny with another cold, and once again you're sick with a cold, and you have to go through the same thing again. So you probably have had many, many colds over your lifetime, but you can say with some certainty that you've never had the exact same cold again. You'll become immune. And a quick way to cause immunity is with a vaccine. That's like a dead organism. Your body reacts the same way. And that, of course, has saved many, many lives from diseases that used to be deadly. I hope this was helpful, and good luck with learning the immune system.